So, Ian, what is the one thing that truly maximizes the value of someone's home when they go to sell their property?
Yeah, I like this question, and I think it's going to be very relevant for next year as well. Because I feel like pre-budget there was a lot of people holding off, and I think statistically it's something like 10% less people came to the market the 6 weeks leading up to the budget, and then because we're about to hit that festive period in the new year, there's going to be an influx of listings. And when there's an influx of listings from the seller's point of view, you have to stand out from the crowd, and buyers are probably going to be the same level. So you need to find that one thing in your home. And our responsibility as estate agents is to be the marketeer that can find that one thing in someone's home to set them apart from the other four or five, for sale boards in the estate, if you like. So if we kind of, I do a session on this, but if you think about superheroes, because I love a superhero, think about Wolverine, we can quickly identify his one thing. He's got those claws, hasn't he? And that's the first thing you think of. He's, as a superhero, he's famous for that. If you think about Spider-Man, he's like a spider. He casts webs and flies across buildings. And Iron Man has got his suit, and the Hulk is obviously incredibly strong. So they've got their one thing. We have to find the one thing, the superpower for the house that we're valuing or listing to try and help the seller. And then if you look at other products, which may be a little bit more relatable, something like a Red Bull, it's known for its energy or its wings, as the marketing would say. If you think about Kit Kat, pretty basic chocolate biscuit, but it's known for taking a break. They've done a really good story around, if you're going to take a break, have a Kit Kat, and it's got clever because you break the two fingers in half, obviously. And then if you looked at something like Volvo, as a car, not everyone's sexiest car, but it's known as safety. So if you're a cautious individual that wants to look after your family, you buy a Volvo because it's the safest car to drive your kids around in. So from a property point of view, what's the one thing for the home? And a lot of those products that we just spoke about, they look at the market and the buyer profiling first, and then they identify the product back because of the buyer profile. We can't do that because we're not creating the product. The house is what the house is. The seller has created the product. So we have to do it in a reverse way from a marketing point of view and go, well, what is this one thing around this property that we can then find the majority of buyers that's going to pay 10, 15 grand more than the other homes in the estate? And the way that I kind of try and look at that is around the lifestyle of the buyer profile. So are we talking to families in this home, families that work from home that have got teenage kids, or a young family? Are we looking at people that are very into the outdoorsy? Is it a commuter town where people are going to be commuting into London or whatever it may be? We have to find that one thing and then kind of build that story around the marketing. So, the nonsense where it's like close to commuter links, catchment for primary schools, that jargon doesn't sort of flush anymore, especially with AI and AI search as well. Is what is the story? What's the one thing around that particular house? And it could be that the seller's just spent 50 grand blowing the back of the house out, amazing bifolds, lovely kind of, glass ceiling and a really entertaining kind of kitchen area. And then the story around that is, this is perfect for a family of entertainers. That's where you get that maximum value for that home, because you've found the one thing that will drive the value of it up because you've built a story around that narrative. And because the house is the house, we can't change the product. We have to maybe talk to a different target audience rather than just slapping it on Rightmove and hoping people like the photos, really. So that's going to be important Q1, I think, next year more than ever. I can't hear you.
Because I've muted myself. So I say that in my sort of private one-on-one strategy calls with sellers, which is, in my view, there's three things that either make or break the sale. And one of those, or the three, is the agent, the pricing strategy, or the marketing. And part of the marketing is really who is your ideal client. And so I absolutely love the way you've brought that to life, because yes, great, we can all see the features. We can all see the benefit of that feature. But really, features and benefits don't really, in my opinion, and I agree with you, sell houses. What actually sells houses is talking to the, as I ask when I'm doing like the copywriting before we put the property descriptions on the portals, on the website, across videos, Mr. or Mrs. Client, who do you think is your ideal buyer and why?
Who were they when they bought it? Because it's likely to be the same, and they've evolved. And as agents, we profile buyers in our CRMs, how we profile them to the public, which is not necessarily the right way. First time buyer, under offer, nothing to sell, in rented accommodation, cash buyer, etc. But really we should profile a buyer. That's their position. A buyer is not defined as their position. They're defined as their goals and the reason why they want to find that home. So are they buying the home for a lifestyle? Are they buying it for family upsizing? Are they buying it because they're entertainers? What type of person is the buyer that's likely to buy that home? That's really key in terms of how you then talk the marketing to attract that type of buyer, because all we're trying to do is bridge the gap in the relationship between the home and the buyer ultimately. And it's I'm not a big social person, as much as people might see me on camera and stuff and think, oh, I'm not actually quite social. I've got a very small circle. I'm not down for kind of small talk. And as a result, growing up, I've found that to talk to people, it was much easier for me to sit back and just take a little bit of analysis on their behavior to maybe find something that I could connect with them. So there isn't small talk. It's, oh, I noticed you were doing X and I love X. It's kind of, that's how I would do it. And it's very similar in this game. It's on evaluation. Why is someone moving? What is their goal? Okay, well, let's digest that. And how can we pull a buyer in that's going to ultimately pay the maximum price for the home because they've emotionally connected to it. They've walked through the door feeling good because of the marketing, the way you've listed it out, and they get that feeling because they're already in a positive mindset. They're already in a positive place because they've got that one thing that they're looking forward to seeing, basically. And I think that's a great way to look at it from a marketeer's eyes, if you like.
Absolutely. Would you say then you are more of a marketing business that knows exactly how to sell property? So you're a marketing company more than an estate agency?
I think I started in 2003. I did 16 years in traditional agency, climbed the ladder there. Everything that I was focused on was at kind of director level, was KPIs, conversion rates, departments being efficient. And it was a numbers game, 10 branches, 100 staff. Everything was about those small margins. And from my eyes, I was trained to very much look at the KPIs. We use like Repit CRM. What was the reporting saying at the start of the day? The transition into kind of the Avocado setup, and everything now is very different. It is about marketing. It is very much not looking at the KPIs, really looking at the relationship with the client and looking at the home, how we can market ourselves and market the home to the best possible ability. And I think lockdown had a transition on that basis as well. And I think not all estate agents, but a big proportion of estate agents really embraced that lockdown change and started to look more into socials and videos and marketing and really self-educated themselves into a more modern way of doing business in this era that we're now in, really. So yeah, I would say it doesn't sound sexy, but I think an estate agent is consultancy and marketing. It's not sales. It's never been sales. It's consultancy and marketing in my eyes.
And that's really interesting you say that, because I say we have the term like sales negotiator. I don't negotiate. And the reason I don't negotiate is because of I'm putting property to market at exactly the right level that's going to attract the very best buyers. And when I'm doing that, I'm putting my seller, as what I think you're alluding to, is putting your seller in pole position and putting him in firm control of the sale of their home. Is that fair?
Yeah, I think so. And I think we're trying to create an element of FOMO. So if we're looking at the negotiating part, offers come in, seller wants X, buyer wants Y. Okay, in that period of time, there is an element of sales communication that you need to bring to it. But in the whole spectrum of 6 or 9 months that you're going to work with that seller on that journey to try and find a new property, because the reason why they're putting their house on the market 99% of the time is because they want to find a new one. And as a secondary result of finding a new one and going and achieving that next milestone, that next goal, they need to release finance that's in their home. So from our point of view, the primary goal is to sell their home, but actually from their point of view, that's just secondary to what the primary goal is. If we remember that, then we can kind of really build those steps in the right way. And we are consultants, we are passing information, and it's not our product. We're not Greg's. We didn't make the sausage roll and then we sold it. It's someone else's. We're marketing it and we're consulting along the way to try and improve the efficiency and the stress levels in the journey for the seller, and then at some point the buyer as well, if we can.
Absolutely. You mentioned getting into the industry 2003, running departments at director level, looking at KPIs, looking at what the reporting system is saying. Why did you go from being successful in your own right within maybe the employed world to actually say, do you know what, fuck this, I'm now creating Avocado Property at a time when, oh my God, the world was collapsing? What was the reason? Why did you do that?
Yeah, so I had my eldest daughter in 2016, and at that point, moral compass changed. I became a father. That was my title then, whereas before, agency and business and being a sales director, that was what I lived for. That was what I did. I was in the office at 7:30. I'd work until I needed to work, and on the awards, and that was life. And then I had my daughter, and that was life. So without knowing it, I became a protector, and I became someone that looked at the future, and I looked at the value of my time and the time that I would spend with her, and family became the priority, and it shifted away from that role. But also morally, like having a daughter, I can't speak for someone that's had a son. I'm sure it's a different version. I've got 2 daughters, but having a daughter, you kind of look at the world a little bit differently. And clients became clients rather than transactions and figures. And I tried to shift the cultural element of the business that I was in the best I could to make it nicer for the people. The tagline, people before property. Prior to having my daughter, it was property before people in reality. And then I had my daughter and the moral compass changed, but it wasn't my business. I was running it for 2 owners, and 10 years, 20 years older than me, the culture of how that business was created was an aggressive, fast track, kind of poor man's Foxtons, if you like. And that's what it was built to be. So over 2 years, I kind of just became the black sheep in the boardroom. I was the youngest, and I just had a different mindset to things. And eventually that got to loggerheads where settlement agreement happened. We went our separate ways. It was scary. It wasn't expected. It happened between exchange and completion of the house that I sit in now, which, timing is never perfect, but it happened in the way that it happened. And then I decided to create my own agency, and just lo and behold, it happened to be the polar opposite of where I'd been previously. And that's what we created, from, young gift of the gab guys in suits from Next to pink hoodies and leaflet dropping and direct mail to social media and videos. It's sometimes you do things in a total flip, and that was what was created at that point. In back into 2019, we started to create it from a fundamental point of view, and then 6 days before lockdown in 2020, we kicked it off, and the timing was the timing. It actually worked in our favour, to be fair, but we didn't know what was coming. It just happened the way it happened. So yeah.
And going back to that bit you just said about the transition from, was it no suits, no leaflets, to then bright pink hoodies with a big avocado written on it. How did you find that cultural shift in terms of the way the market then started perceiving you guys?
It's a massive risk, and we had no idea. That was a total gamble. It was, okay, if we're going to stand out from the crowd, because there's a lot of estate agents, as we all know, we have to do something bold. The marketing guy that we were working with at the time suggested the pink hoodie. We were on the fence with it a little bit, suggested the message. We kind of then built it into our own model, and we just went with it. But we had no idea how it would be responded to from the public's eyes. We wanted to make a statement saying, look, this is the stereotype. We know it's the third most stressful thing to do. We know the industry is not very well respected. We're going to do the opposite in every single way. And then we're going to tell people we're doing the opposite. And that will give us that sort of marketing avatar that we wanted in the middle. We didn't want the 25% on that side, the purple bricksers and the cheap agents and the stripes, etc., strikes. And we didn't want the Savills market. We just wanted the family market in the middle. So we profiled our marketing around that. And we had no idea how people would respond to it. It was either going to be a flop. And me and Mike said, if it's a flop, we'll just go back into agency on 80 grand a year and we'll just ride it out. If it works, then we're good. 4 weeks into the soft launch, I had a conversation in Sainsbury's in the middle of lockdown from 2 different sets of checkouts where people had seen the video and they said, love what you're doing, love your videos, love your messages, keep doing it. I rang Mike afterwards. I said, it's worked, we're good. And we knew from that week 4, okay, crack on, double down, we're good.
And 1,000 Google reviews later, is that right?
Across all of the agents, yeah, there's over 1,000 5-star reviews, yeah.
And I think, there is, I've read an article recently, was talking about Google reviews and people not trusting 5 stars, and said the actual trust, what they really trust is 4.2, right? And I was like, no, I want 5 stars. I want 5 stars, because 5 stars, when a seller is reaching out to give you a 5-star review, regardless of if that's you personally or across your team, and 1,000 of those in 5 years, that is incredible. And that must, how do you feel now? So if you take yourself back to that scary moment of going, right, we're starting a business, lockdown, shit. Also, messaging completely different to what it was before, but now you're where you are today. How does that feel?
Yeah, the Google reviews are amazing, but the things that I love the most is when someone asks in a Facebook group, can anyone recommend a good local estate agent? And then you see the supporters in that Facebook group and you see the agent tagged or Avocado tagged or the website or the Facebook page and some of the comments that go with it. Some of these clients have never even used us, but they just love the content. Some of the clients used us 3 years ago and they're still what I classify as a super fan. That really, you kind of, every time you see that, you kind of fall back in love with the process again, because you're like, okay, keep doing it. It's working. It's helping. The Google reviews are amazing. Any review from a client is amazing. We've got some amazing client testimonial videos as well, but it's those moments where it's just totally authentic. Can someone recommend? And you just see boom, 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 and you think, wow, that's really cool. I never in a million years would have thought that, 2020, that we'd still see that today in the Facebook groups, because that's the stuff that makes you smile for sure.
It's making me smile. I absolutely love that, because I know how much it means, but not just to you, but also to the person that's taking the time out to write that, because of course they fully believe in the service you're providing. Yeah. Now, one of the things that's a bit of a, obviously a massive buzzword at the moment is AI. And people have said, look, if AI is going to be around, it's going to continue, it's going to move forward, and agents that are not using it are probably going to fall by the wayside. I don't know what are your thoughts around AI, Ian?
I just think AI is a member of staff in your team, and in reality, we're all paying for it. We're either paying for it because we're physically paying for it and we're using it and we're putting our payment method in time and education of learning how to leverage it and use it in the most efficient way for our business, or we're paying for it because we're not using it and the competition is, and you're falling further away from being an elite business in the modern day and age. So I just see it as it's a member of the team. It's the fastest learning member of your team. It could be the most influential member of the team. It will never be you. It will never be the owner. It will never be the person. But in an efficient way, if you think VA, PA, marketing consultant, it could be a superpower in your team that really is the engine of what goes on inside your team. Won't ever be the face. You always need the face. I think if you look at like Richard Branson, there'll always be Richard Branson, but Richard Branson has an operations director. That could be AI. And in the same way, if you look at kind of Apple with Steve Jobs and then obviously his COO, Steve was a. It's the equivalent of that. You always need the KPI, the key person of influence, but if you really embrace it, you can get the best out of it. And there's some pretty cool stuff that it's doing now. I mean, my chat I've had flowing with me now, paid for 2 years. It gets me. It knows what I want. It talks to me like a person. The voice command. I'm often having a conversation in the car with my chat, who sounds like one of the female radio presenters, my wife says, but I didn't create that. I just think it's a great tool. It's a great member of staff. And you either put the time and energy into that member of staff being AI, or you don't. And if you don't, your competition is, and you'll fall behind. So that's the way I view it.
Yeah, absolutely. And also as well, it's actually helping and assisting in thinking outside the box as well. Yeah. Is what I come across. I'm like, oh, I didn't think of that. Oh, I like that. Let me do a little bit of a deep dive. But you said earlier, people over property. How does that sort of show up internally within the business? How does that look?
Yeah, well, through the client's eyes, it's remembering on an appointment, like I said earlier, the primary goal is the move, not the sale. So it's always just remembering from a cultural point of view, when you're helping a client, you're trying to help them with their move. You're not necessarily trying to help them with the sale of their home. So that's the people before property through the client's perspective. It's, I'm going to help you as a person on your journey. Even if it's out of area, I'm going to help you move to your dream home, the next home, the journey. To do that, you need to sell. And I'm going to help be very influential in that part, but I'm going to help you with the whole target, the whole goal, or otherwise we don't get paid anyway. In terms of internally, it's the word culture. And it's so difficult to describe culture, in a 60-second elevator pitch, but it's just how you treat people. It's just the message that you put out there. It's just making sure that the people feel valued, that you give them. It's like from a parent point of view, kids have got Christmas coming round, at the point of us recording this. Yeah, they want presents, and yeah, they want to open presents. All they want when they break up from school is time with their parents. That's all they want, is the time. And staff are the same. They just want to be heard. They want to be respected, and they want to feel important in the overall mission. And that's the most important thing for us, is we talk about people and we communicate with people. I love the book, The Legacy. I don't know if you've ever read Legacy. It's about the All Blacks, and the All Blacks basically talk about their culture in it. And the senior leadership team within the All Blacks, obviously the most successful sporting team in history, they passed the baton around this team of 6. And the baton is the speaking baton. Everyone gets that period of time uninterrupted to share their feelings, their thoughts and their opinions. And I love that book, because that message, if you just think about that sort of authentically sat around a campfire, if you like, that should be the culture in your team. Everyone gets a fair amount of time to talk, share their feelings, and it's created in that sort of cultural way of being heard, really. So that kind of in a nutshell is what it means to me.
Yeah, and as you mentioned as well, not just in the office, I think that's special. I really, really, really like that, because how often as an employee or a self-employed member of the team, but you don't really feel like you got a voice, and you don't really feel like you can say anything either, and you're sort of just a little bit of a sheep in the background thinking, I'm going to make myself look like a right idiot if I say this. Yeah. But equally at the same time with sellers as well. How many times have you been on a call with a seller at, say, 9 or 10 o'clock at night, just talking shit through? Maybe that you're actually not even talking about the sale itself. You're just having a conversation and hearing them out, and they leave the call. You've not said anything, but they leave the call like, wow, he really knows me. Yeah. That guy really gets me. And leading on to sort of like ultra marathons as well, because that's something I wanted to ask you. I've seen a lot of your socials and the running that you do. Fair play, mate. That's incredible. Would you say the ultra marathons have had an impact on your business? And if so, how?
I think for me, ultra marathons, they started around the same time as Avocado, kind of 2020 is when I got into them. I don't know if that coincided. It was a lockdown thing, really. Started running in lockdown. It's made me a better businessman. It's made me a better husband. It's made me a better parent. It's definitely made me a better person all around. There's nothing more humbling than I've done 400-mile races now, but there is nothing more humbling than 16 hours into a run, knowing that you've probably got to run for another 8 hours, 6 hours, at least another marathon to do. It's pitch black, it's raining, you're tired, everything hurts, and you probably cry at some point for the next half an hour, and then you kind of pick yourself up and you crack on. That is the most humbling thing. And when you get to the finish line, knowing that you've had that moment where you thought, there's no way I can do another 8 hours, and you remember that moment where you went, oh no, I didn't quit, I did find the solutions, everything's just easier in life afterwards. You go through the finish line, and I sit in a meeting now from a work point of view. It might be difficult, but it's not as difficult as that. So it's made that happen to me. And it's a reminder that the finish line is a single moment of success, but everything that led up to that, the education, the research, the fueling, the training, the discipline, I've got a bit of a cold at the moment. I went out and did 10 miles this morning, doing that when you don't really want to do it. All of that lead up is to that single moment of success, and it always feels worth it. But when you're training, sometimes you question it. So it's made me better from that perspective. From a business point of view, it's the same thing. As we know, we're talking about house sales or helping clients here. It might be 9 months you work with that client, but it's all leading up to completion day. That single moment of success in all the hard work for the last 9 months that you've gone through. Maybe it fell through. Maybe difficult moments have happened. We've had to have different conversations. The buyer messed around. The solicitors were on holiday for 2 weeks. You couldn't spit. All of those moments just led up to that single moment of success. I love the Usain Bolt quote where he says, I trained for 4 years to run for 9 seconds. It's like that's house sales, right? That's what this is about. That's business sometimes. So yeah, it's helped in that. It definitely.
And that's because this industry, it's like you mentioned, when we're running a transaction, progressing the deal, is full of hard and horrible conversations, because it's not just the seller that you're working with, right? It's like herding cats of all the other elements, mortgage, solicitors, times two, then the chain, and then working with the different personalities within different agencies across that chain to try and get all those cats into a position to do X, Y, and Z. But when you're doing an ultra marathon and your feet are killing you, it's dark, it's raining, as you said, how can I possibly go on? What I love about that, of what you said, is that's proper hard and horrible. This hard and horrible conversation I thought I was going to have, actually pretty easy by comparison. And if, from an attitude perspective, if I tell the world I'm going to run 100 miles and I do it, then I'm going to deliver results for my clients.
Yeah. I say it to the agents, sometimes, as you well know, there's self-employed models out there. And sometimes, I'll talk to an agent that's kind of shopping around and thinking where they'll use. And a couple of times people will say, what's the difference of me working with you, Ian, to working somewhere else? And I'll say, my level of commitment is the fact that I can run 100 miles and I won't quit. And you launching your business, what happens over the next 6 months is the most important thing to you. Because if you get through the first 6 months, then you're rocking and rolling. But I won't sleep. If you've not got a listing inside the first 6 weeks, I'm not sleeping, you're not sleeping. We're on that journey together, but we'll find a way to make it work. That's the success rate that we'll deliver. And just knowing that someone is saying that, but actually has got a CV that can back that up because of what they've done physically and mentally, it helps me add some level of trust and authority on the subject, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. Couldn't agree more. And I suppose that leads me nicely on to pretty much my last question, which is, if you were going to give an agent, whether that's somebody thinking about starting in the industry or somebody that's already in the industry thinking about joining Avocado, for example, what would be the single biggest advice you would give that agent?
There's never a single piece in this game, is there? It's individual to everyone's needs, but you just need to be in a position mentally to be ready to work on solutions. And I think in any walk of life, any business, anything that we go into, you can divide personalities into people that blame and find problems. They're blaming someone else, which I think is giving the power away to someone else. They're looking at problems and they're moany. That's not self-employed. That's not going to work for you. You're meant to be a number 4 in a business and be really good at being a number 4, but you're not meant to run a business if that's your mindset. If you're focused on finding the solution, even though it doesn't look like there is one, but you're going to do everything you can to find that solution to that problem, and you look at a problem and you see it as an opportunity, and then you go and research, learn, use your experience to find the answer to the question, then that's the best mindset that you can be in. So it's not really a case of giving a single piece of advice. It's more a question: which bucket are you going in? Because if it's the left one and it's problems, don't do it. Go and stay employed. If it's the other one, everything else can be taught because you've got the right headspace for it, and go and do it because you're ready. You might feel you're never ready, never the perfect time, but if that's your mindset and that's the way you're prepared to focus, let's get on that journey together and do it.
Ian Macbeth, Avocado Property. Mate, thank you so much for coming on this podcast. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you, John. Appreciate it.